Welcome to Americana Obscura. America is more than just a nation of skyscrapers and neon lights. It is a colossal epic, written through some of the most seismic events in human history. To truly understand this land, we must travel back over 20,000 years. At that time, the world was still held in the frozen grip of the Great Ice Age, and North America lay dormant beneath a shroud of ice. Back then, a natural land bridge known as Beringia connected Asia and America. Small groups of ancient hunters, driven by an unyielding will to survive, took their first tentative steps onto this promised land. They had no idea they were discovering a new world. They were simply following the trail of mammoths and great beasts, venturing into a vast territory where no human foot had ever stepped, a pristine and mysterious paradise. Over millennia of settlement, these people branched into hundreds of vibrant tribes. From the proud Sioux warriors of the endless plains to the wisdom of the Iroquois Confederacy in the northeast. They lived in harmony with the wild for centuries, until strange sails appeared on the distant horizon. While the Americas lived in isolation, a different world was stirring. European monarchs were desperate for a new route to the east. In 1492, under the patronage of Spain, an ambitious explorer named Christopher Columbus set sail with 3 small ships. He wasn't just looking for land. He was chasing a dream of gold, glory, and a legacy that would change history forever. For weeks, they saw nothing but the endless blue. Hope was fading, and mutiny began to whisper among the exhausted crew. Then, a faint silhouette appeared through the morning mist, the shores of San Salvador. A new world was finally within reach. This was the first contact. 2 worlds, separated by millennia, finally met in a moment that would reshape the planet. Columbus called it the New World, completely unaware that he had stumbled upon a continent already inhabited by millions. But the peaceful encounter would soon vanish. The era of the Spanish cross and sword had begun. As the 17th century dawned, a new power looked toward the west. England, eager to challenge the world, began sending its pioneers to the rugged American coast. In 1607, Jamestown was founded in the marshes of Virginia. It was a brutal beginning, a struggle against hunger, disease, and unknown shadows. The colony nearly perished until they discovered brown gold tobacco. This single crop became the economic engine that ensured their survival. 13 years later, far to the north, the Mayflower arrived at Plymouth. On board were the Pilgrims, families seeking more than just profit. They sought religious freedom. Their arrival marked a new kind of settlement, one built on faith, harsh winters, and the first roots of community. Slowly, 13 distinct colonies took shape along the Atlantic shore. Each had its own spirit, from the bustling ports of the north to the vast fields of the south. A new American identity was quietly being forged. A people who were British by law, but increasingly American by heart and spirit. But as these colonies grew, the shadow of the British crown grew longer, setting the stage for a revolution that would change the world. By the 1770s, the bond between Britain and its colonies began to fray. Parliament imposed heavy taxes, yet refused the colonists a voice in government. Number taxation without representation became the rallying cry. In the shadows, Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty began to organize. On a freezing December night in 1773, a group of patriots disguised as Mohawk warriors boarded British merchant ships in Boston Harbor. They dumped 342 chests of tea into the harbor, a silent, floating protest against the tyranny of the crown. King George III responded with iron-fisted laws. He closed the port and sent thousands of redcoats to enforce his will. But the colonies were no longer scattered. For the first time, leaders from across the land met in Philadelphia, united by a common threat. The night was broken by Paul Revere's frantic ride, warning every farm and village, "The British are coming." At Lexington, a single shot rang out. The shot heard round the world had officially started the revolution. The Continental Army was a ragtag force of farmers and merchants, facing the world's most powerful empire. Leading them was George Washington. In July 1776, a bold parchment changed everything. The Declaration of Independence proclaimed that all men are created equal. But the road was paved with hardship. At Valley Forge, hunger and frostbite claimed more lives than any British bullet ever could. Through the bitter cold, they endured. Under strict training, the survivors emerged not as rebels, but as a professional army. France, seeing a chance to weaken their old rival, sent ships, soldiers, and gold to tip the scales in favor of liberty. The victory at Saratoga proved the impossible. The Americans could win. This alliance changed the course of human history. The endgame came at Yorktown. Surrounded by Washington's troops and the French fleet, the British had nowhere to run. The world turned upside down. A new nation was born, a republic built on the radical promise of freedom. With independence secured, the young nation cast its eyes toward the vast, untamed horizon of the West. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the country overnight, stretching from the Mississippi to the Rockies. Lewis and Clark led a daring expedition into the unknown, mapping rivers and mountains that few Europeans had ever seen. The idea of manifest destiny took hold, the belief that America was destined to stretch from ocean to ocean. Wagon trains began the grueling journey along the Oregon Trail, carrying families seeking a new life and fertile soil. In 1848, the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill sparked a global frenzy, drawing thousands of 49ers to California. Boomtowns rose from the dust, and the frontier spirit became a core part of the American soul. But this expansion came at a heavy cost to those who had called this land home for thousands of years. As the American border pushed further west, the original inhabitants faced a systematic and tragic displacement. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed by Andrew Jackson, forced thousands from their ancestral lands in the southeast. The Cherokee Nation called it the Trail of Tears, a forced march of sorrow through freezing winters and disease. Thousands perished along the way, leaving behind a legacy of pain and broken promises that still echoes today. Resistance was fierce. In Florida, the Seminole people fought a long and bloody guerrilla war against the U.S. Army. Leaders like Osceola became symbols of defiance, refusing to surrender their identity or their sacred soil. But the tide of expansion was relentless, fueled by a hunger for land that no treaty could satisfy. A dark chapter was being written in the dust, as a culture was pushed to the brink of survival. By the mid-19th century, a deep shadow fell over the Union. The issue of slavery had become an open wound. The industrial North and the agrarian South were two worlds moving in completely opposite directions. In 1861, the tension snapped. The South seceded, and the bloodiest conflict in American history began. Brother fought brother on fields like Gettysburg and Antietam, as the very fate of the nation hung in the balance. In the midst of the chaos, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, changing the war's purpose. The war became a crusade for human freedom, drawing thousands of former slaves to join the Union cause. The Union was eventually preserved, but at a staggering cost of over 600,000 lives. The chains were broken, but the long, difficult road to true equality had only just begun. After the Civil War, America entered a period of explosive growth known as the Gilded Age. The Transcontinental Railroad finally linked east to west, turning a vast wilderness into a single, massive market. Titans of industry like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie built empires of oil and steel that reshaped the world. Cities began to reach for the sky. The first steel-framed skyscrapers rose in Chicago and New York, symbols of a new era. Electricity flickered to life, as Thomas Edison's light bulb chased away the darkness of the old world. But beneath the golden surface, millions of workers faced harsh conditions and low wages in cramped factories. The gap between the mega-rich and the poor widened, sparking the rise of labor unions and a fight for rights. America was no longer an agrarian republic. It had become an industrial superpower. The 1920s roared with jazz and newfound wealth. America was the world's banker, and the future seemed limitless. But in October 1929, the dream shattered. The stock market crashed, and the Great Depression plunged millions into poverty. Breadlines stretched for miles. Dust storms choked the plains. It was a decade of hardship that tested the American spirit. Franklin D. Roosevelt promised a New Deal, using the power of government to rebuild hope and infrastructure. Across the ocean, the drums of war began to beat again. On December 7, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor changed everything. The nation became the arsenal of democracy. Factories that once made cars now pumped out tanks and planes. From the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, American forces fought for a world free from tyranny. The war ended with a mushroom cloud, leaving America as the undisputed leader of the free world. The 1990s brought a revolution not of weapons, but of information. The World Wide Web connected the globe in an instant. Silicon Valley became the new frontier, as tech giants redefined how we live, work, and communicate with each other. The dust of World War II had barely settled before a new, silent conflict began. A shadow fell across Europe, the Iron Curtain. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union stood on the brink, locked in a tense standoff of ideologies and nuclear power. Stars. In 1969, the world watched in awe as Apollo 11 landed on the lunar surface. America had won the race to the moon. At home, the 1960s were a time of deep social change. Voices for civil rights rose up, demanding the equality promised centuries ago. The Berlin Wall became the ultimate symbol of a divided world, a barrier of concrete and barbed wire. Then, in 1989, the wall fell. The Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War finally came to an icy end. America stood alone as the world's sole superpower, facing an uncertain but hopeful new millennium. But the new century also brought deep shadows. On September 11, 2001, the world changed forever in a single moment of tragedy. America faced new and complex challenges, navigating a global landscape of shifting security and social change. From the historic election of the first African-American president to the dawn of artificial intelligence, the story continues. Today, the United States remains a landscape of contradictions, of immense progress and deeply rooted struggles. Yet, it is always driven forward by an unyielding spirit of innovation and the radical hope that built this nation. The American story is far from over. The next chapter is being written right now, by all of us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Americana Obscura. If you enjoyed this epic, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more hidden history. Until next time.